And now it's a great honor to welcome to the program a world-renowned seasoned entertainer who is truly country music royalty. He's the eldest son of the late country music legends Buck Owens and Bonnie Owens, the great Mr. Buddy Allen Owens. Buddy, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine. Thank you, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to appear on the program and to talk about your music.
My pleasure. I'm honored that you would ask. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. I'm very glad to have you. And I guess we'll get started if that's all right with you.
Sure.
As I just mentioned a moment ago, you are the son of the legendary Buck Owens and Bonnie Owens. And I was wondering, did your parents ever tell you how they first met?
Well, I know how they first met. They were actually they met in school here in Arizona. Let me back up a little bit. I'll just tell you a little bit about before they met. And my dad was born in Sherman, Texas, son of a sharecropper, and his dad was a farmer and did whatever he could to feed his family. My mom was born in Norman, Oklahoma, and they were born the same year, about 6 weeks apart, actually, and probably 500 miles apart, and both of their families at about the same time decided that in search of work, because of the, you've heard of the Great Harass and the Great Dust Bowl and all of that, both of them needed to find work, and so within a few days of one another, without even knowing it, and a lot of this seems to be fate as we look back, but they were both driving out with their families, and my dad had a couple of my dad's family had a couple of cars and 14 people, and my mom had and her family had 3 cars and 15 people. And so coincidentally, my mom and her family stopped in Arizona because my grandmother, I guess, had relatives here, and so they decided to stop for a few days here in Phoenix, where I live. And my dad and his family, their car broke down just outside of Phoenix, and so they were sort of forced to wait until they could, the guys could go out and find work, and they could figure out a way to, fix the car that had broken down. So, in that amount of time, then one thing led to another, and all the guys got decent jobs, and they decided to stay for a while. And my mom's family decided to stay for a while, and they both entered school. And they met when they were about in the 8th grade, 8th or 9th grade, and neither of them knew that the other one sang. And they're just more or less acquaintances. My dad actually dated my mom's sister, and so they were just sort of passing friends. And my dad was getting interested in music about that time, and he and another guy decided to form a band, and they were looking for a girl singer. Well, they put flyers all around their high school and around their little town out there, and who shows up but my mom. And she asked my dad, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I'm the guitar player in the band." And he said to her, he said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to be the girl singer in this band." And so that's pretty much how they met and got to be friends. And from that day on, they really were friends, even through their tough times and their divorce and all of that. They were friends for the rest of their lives, and both of them just loved each other, but they just couldn't be married to each other.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly that when I didn't realize this, but I knew your dad was a great musician and very proficient on the guitar, though he didn't always play the solos in his shows. It sort of varied from year to year, kind of how much guitar playing he was doing as far as lead work went. But he played the fiddle, and I think it was even in that first band that he was the steel guitar player, actually. Wasn't that the first instrument he picked up?
That is correct. He actually they had a guitar player in the band, and so he my dad was a really good musician, played everything by ear, couldn't really read a note of music, but he could pick up an instrument and within 30 minutes be playing it, and that's just the kind of musician instrumentalist that he was.
That's such an amazing talent. Some people, they work years to perfect one instrument, and here he could pick it up right away.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he was an aficionado of all of the instruments, but I would imagine he could probably play 20 instruments, including saxophone and trombone, and fiddle, steel guitar, drums, bass guitar, lead guitar, probably anything he picked up. I know he played mandolin for a while, and he even dabbled with the banjo. So it just sort of came natural to him. He could hear the music where other people had to see the notes to play. He could just sort of feel them and hear them. It comes natural with a great musician.
Was there any particular reason why he didn't always play lead guitar in his shows? Or,
Well, it's awfully difficult to be the lead singer and to play all the lead guitar. I would say that the main reason he didn't play lead guitar was because at about the age of when Don was about 13 or 14, he met my dad met a young man named Don Ulrich up in Washington, and invited him to come out and play. Don was a fiddle player, had never played the guitar, never picked up the guitar, and so my dad was the guitar player, and Don played the fiddle, and so for several years it just stayed like that, and then gradually, out of boredom a little bit, Don started picking up the guitar and just dabbling with it and messing around with it. And the next thing you know, my dad was showing him things here and there, and Don was becoming pretty good at it. Well, he became good enough at it that my dad said, Don, you're going to start playing the lead guitar. So get all my records and learn them, and so he got all of his old records and learned the guitar parts, and so when it was a fiddle song, Don would play the fiddle. When it was a guitar song, something would act naturally or something with a guitar in it, Don would play the guitar, and that just took a lot of pressure off my dad. But he still, even until he died, he played lead guitar on a lot of his songs, and every once in a while you can take a lead guitar break. It's just that it's difficult to sing and play all the background licks, at the same time.
Yeah, that's definitely, you need somebody, even if you're gonna take the lead, like Buck always had his guitar player, steel guitarist and guitarist that would do the fill-ins in between while he was singing, because that is difficult to do at the same time. Then
yes, it is.
When you're trying to sing and play at the same time, but well, you mentioned that your father taught Don his, basically the same style of Telecaster guitar playing, and they actually, I believe it was when they had their first hit records, they just went around and they toured basically just the two of them with their two guitars at that point, and that was when they really started to feature the electric guitar sound, which was...
Yeah, that is true. His first successful records featured the fiddle a lot of fiddle and a lot of steel guitar, and because he couldn't afford a band, he just carried. It was just he and Don. A lot of times they'd travel around in a station wagon or a small car, and then eventually they did add a steel guitar player for a few days, and it was a good friend of his. But Dusty was not a great steel guitar player. He wasn't a great instrumentalist. He was more of a visionist, a manager type, and so that's kind of what that gentleman became.